welcome to another episode of Heart to Heart on Healthy Heart Nation. I'm so excited to be speaking with you today. We have a phenomenal guest that's going to be joining us, and we're going to be talking about Black trauma. We've experienced a lot of trauma in our community, and today we're going to talk about what trauma really is, and we're going to receive some tools and resources on how we can effectively address our trauma and start working towards healing our trauma. So, I'd like to welcome our guest, Christina Cooper. She is an acclaimed keynote speaker, a master trainer, and a licensed psychotherapist specializing in treating women recovering from trauma, codependency, and other life altering conditions. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you, Michelle. It's great to be here.
Yes, we are so happy to have you here. And also my co host, Erin.
Hi,
Hi.
nice to see you.
Hi, Erin. Nice to see you.
So, like I shared with our audience, we are going to be talking about Black trauma and trauma in the Black community. Can you talk to us a little bit, Christina? Is trauma the same as like if I'm really upset or disturbed about a particular incident or something that's occurred in my life? Is that the same thing or is trauma something totally different? Because I know a lot of times we interchange. I'm traumatized when really I was just really disturbed by the situation.
Yeah, I think in today's world, especially probably over the last 5 or 6 years, the word trauma has been overused and very much colloquialized in our world. But trauma is simply a very disturbing event or circumstance that exceeds our ability to cope. That's all
Okay.
trauma is. Something disturbing that exceeds our ability to cope. And so trauma is something that people experience as a result of something disturbing happening. And so it's different for everyone. I could witness something profoundly disturbing and it might not exceed my ability to cope. I may be like, oh, let me just go pray and then I'll do a visualization and it'll be out of my mind. And the next person will be like, I'm having nightmares, intrusive thoughts, horrific memories of this thing that happened. And I need to
Right.
see somebody because I can't get it out of my mind. It doesn't mean that either of those people are weaker than the other or stronger than the other. It just means that we're all different. And so when we're looking at trauma, it's a very individualized experience for everybody.
And so you were talking about, so if I am having intrusive thoughts or nightmares or whatever, is that my inability to cope?
Yes, it's a sign that you're not coping well
Okay.
with what happened. If you're having, more disturbance as a result of the primary disturbance, then yes, that's a sign that you're not really coping well with what you saw, what happened to you. Um, and so that's when there's sort of a red flag there for you that says, oh, wow, I'm really struggling with this. I need to do something about it.
Can you talk to us about too a little bit about trauma in the historical context? Like there's been medical trauma, institutionalized trauma in the educational system.
Mhm.
So there's been a lot of trauma, I think, from different spaces that have impacted, you know, the Black community. And I'm not sure we're even really fully aware of what, that we've experienced certain traumas because they're institutionalized.
Mhm. Black trauma, as you identified it earlier, is pervasive and it exists across all institutions, all systems. And so whenever we're dealing with people in general and specifically Black people, know that wherever that Black person is, there is a likelihood that that person will experience trauma, racial trauma. Um, the thing that's that we need to remember also is that as Black people, we come into the world with a historic trauma. We're walking in already with things that have become part of our DNA, that are part of our collective memory, are things that we're walking into the world with. And so, and that's not unlike any other ethnic group, but I just want to bring it out so that we understand that although it appears that we come into the world with a blank slate, there are things that we're walking into the world with. And one of those things is historical trauma. And so, and this is, I've heard people say, and I don't know if there's any research on this or not, but I've heard people say, well, why can't Black people swim? Why are they all afraid of water?
Mm.
Why are many Black people afraid of water? Yes, it's becoming, uh, you know, more common for Black people to be, learning how to swim and being fish in the water and having pools in their backyards and but historically, there's a reason why we're afraid of water.
Yes.
That's where our primal trauma happened as a people. And so it makes sense that there are many people who are like, I'm not getting, where's the life? I need a life jacket. We're not getting in the boat without a life jacket.
Right.
Thank
you so much for expressing that. That's what I was trying to get to, that, we come with already, like, there's already stuff innate in us. And sometimes we don't even know, right? We don't even know what the source is or where that came from, where those fears and hesitancies come from.
Mm-hmm. And they are passed from generation to generation until we begin to heal from them. And while many of us as a people, we're carrying these things. And generally, as the world moves forward, we know that they'll be a part of our collective history for centuries and centuries to come. It doesn't mean, though, that we cannot build our toolbox and be able to develop coping skills to deal with what we've been forced to go through, even our historical trauma.
Absolutely. I want to chime in. I wanted to just ask about kind of like the first step, right? Like, I feel like in my mind, it kind of goes to exploring the trauma and kind of, like you said, possibly identifying it to try and get to the coping strategies that might be appropriate. So can you talk us through like what might be a first step to the healing process?
Mm-hmm. The first step is recognizing what's happening in your body as a result of what you've experienced. Trauma registers first in the body. It registers first in the body. And so, for instance, when you may be seeing a therapist or going to somebody or talking to somebody about your anxiety, anxiety is not a feeling. Anxiety is your body's response to undealt with emotions, undealt with circumstances, undealt with situations that either you're trying to cope with or that you've had to put on the back burner in order to deal with things that are more needful in your life. And so I tell all of my patients when they come in with anxiety, remember that this is not a feeling. This is not a feeling. It's your body's way of saying to you, alert, alert, something is going on that you need to deal with.
Something absolutely.
That you haven't addressed. And so the first step in being able to address trauma is to recognize what's happening in your body. And then just after that, or in that same breath, you're also identifying what your experience is, what the emotions are that are coming up for you as a result of what you've witnessed or what you have endured. Those are the two primary things. How are you feeling? What are you experiencing in your body? And then how are you feeling? What is the feeling?
So putting words to it after identifying what is the physical, what physically is going on with you, and then trying to put some words to what that looks like.
Yes. And I'm glad you asked for that clarification, Michelle, because the thing about trauma is that it typically doesn't have language. The
Wow.
things that
Okay.
we experience in our bodies after disturbing events or things that have happened, we have an English language that has lots of beautiful words, and we can build this tapestry of words that somehow connect when we're trying to describe our experiences to other people. But the trauma itself has no language. It is an experience that we're having. And the reason why we have to come to a place where we're at least attempting to name what's happening is so that we can make a connection between what happened to us and us. If we never name it, how will we make the connection between the reality that this thing outside of me infringed upon who I am, what I believe, my sense of safety?
Hmm.
If we don't, we have to make that connection just as humans. But the reality is that trauma does not have a language.
Wow. That hit me. That kind of hit me a little hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, because I never thought about that. I always thought like, okay, if I could name it, then that was progress.
Hmm.
And
And in some ways, it is because it gives you a sense of not just ownership over what happened to you, but it gives you a sense of power in
mhm,
some ways over what happened. You can't control what happened in your past.
right.
But if you can name it, then when you start there by naming it, then you can say, okay, well, I'm feeling sad and unsafe. I'm feeling confused and angry. I'm feeling disappointed and ashamed.
Mhm.
Then you can work from those places to heal the innermost parts of yourself that, again, aren't nameable,
Right.
you know?
And I
And
appreciate you mentioning multiple emotions, right? Because I think the duality of feeling different emotions is so important because a lot of people don't know that you can feel more than just one way, in
yes,
the moment. And I think too, working with students that have trauma, that have traumatic experience they've experienced, and they oftentimes do struggle to put a name to it. And I think it's also because they're so young, having gone through terrible things, and they just can't come to a place where they've developed the language to put a name to it. And so I've seen that kind of inner struggle where they're like, I need help, but they can't tell me how I can help them, if that makes sense.
yes, yes. Um, Most people in their families of origin, while they're developing all of the language that they can by their parents reading books to them every night and, you know, copying pages out of the dictionary and using all these verbal skills and build the thing that is lacking in most households with regard to emotional health um, is emotional vocabulary. I have 50 and 60-year-olds coming into my office, and and invariably, at least on any given day, at least if it's a new patient, at least 70 to 80% of my patients struggle to identify the emotions that they're
Mm,
experiencing. They don't have the vocabulary, not because they're not intelligent or are emotionally unintelligent.
right.
They may be able to connect with others in really deep ways. But when it comes to themselves and what they're experiencing, there is a woeful lack of emotional vocabulary that really hinders people from being able to move forward in the healing process, especially from trauma.
Okay, now you said 50, 60 year olds. Let's talk about our youth with
Hmm.
social media and not
Hmm.
needing to have that social or communicate, right? What I
Hmm.
can just abbreviate, send you whatever message.
Yeah.
So how do we help our young people who have experienced trauma or going through traumatic experiences um, find language, right? When I feel like their language is starting to become stunted in a sense, or their vocabulary is becoming
Yeah.
stunted because, you know, all they have to do is text each other. They can be sitting in the same room and not have a full out conversation. So how do we support them in finding language or even just talking about their feelings?
I think by inviting them to do so.
Okay.
Even though most teenagers are, I shouldn't say most, many teenagers are in their rooms most of the time until it's dinner time, until it's time to go to school, until it's time to come out of the room to go somewhere, until their friends ring the doorbell, until there's a specific reason why they're coming out of their room. Okay. And it's important that we intentionally engage them in verbal communication, even if they're annoyed by it. You're knocking on their door. Hey, I wanted to come in and talk to you really quick.
Right.
So what's going on with you? Oh, Mom, nothing. I'm trying to text somebody. Okay, but can you just put that down just for a second? Because I just want to find out what's happening. That we're not afraid to have these conversations. We're not, some of the issues with parents right now are that we're afraid to inconvenience our children.
Oh, say that. I'm
And
not. That's not my problem.
When we're afraid to inconvenience them, how can we really pour in?
Right.
We're always going to be inconveniencing them because they're in their own bubble. They're in a silo with other teenagers and other young people their age. And that silo does not exist inside of our house. It's a cyber silo. It's here. It's on the here. Their lives are in here. And so our job really is we already have access to go in with them to the silo and be like, okay, I know you're talking to your 3 friends on FaceTime or whatever you're doing, but when are you going to be off? Well, I'm probably 30 minutes. Okay, well, in 30 minutes, I'm coming back because we have to talk.
Yeah. Because I was just thinking in terms of, I know so many young people, and I'm sure Erin, she works in the educational system, but so many young people that I work with medical students. And during COVID, there was the isolation that they were feeling because they weren't able to come together. There was them losing family members, right? And they were stressed. Should I go home? But then if I go home, that's going to impact my ability, right, to be able to continue and be what they felt like successful in medical school. It was a lot. And so then it was like, well, let's give you, the space to talk to therapists to be able to express. But it was challenging, right? It was very, very, very challenging to get them to open up, even though they said we don't want to be isolated anymore.
Right.
We want to come, but then, okay, do you want to come in a group setting? Do you want to talk to when you go talk to somebody individually? And the whole session, they're like, well, they didn't say anything.
Right. Yeah.
How do we, again, how do we, like, I know what I can do as a parent. So thank you for, sharing those tools. But like, what do we do for others that are, an extension, and we really don't have that necessary control over them, but we want to be there to support them?
I think it's so important that we remember that the youth we are them. We're several years older, but inside, it's the same. We have some of the same pressures that they have: social pressure, familial pressure, pressure to perform, pressure to be who people expect us to be, it's all those things. And so recognizing that they're also navigating life just as intensely as we are, but in a different developmental stage. If we can recognize that, then our conversations with them won't be so emotionally dwarfed.
I like that.
We need to talk to them about stuff that's real.
Right.
What's actually happening? From my experience with my own children and other youth that I see, young adults that I see in my practice, they're so intelligent. They're so intelligent, and they're so aware more aware than I would say a generation ago was of their own stuff and their own
I
self.
agree. Yes,
They're
yes,
so aware.
yes.
And I think if we operate from the perspective that these are evolved individuals, and they're not evolved because there's some magical thing that's happening with them that didn't happen with us. They're evolved because the world is evolved.
Mhm.
We grew up in the technological age. They're growing up in the information age. It's a completely different picture. I grew up when Apple was just coming out with that humongous box. And it was, I couldn't understand what was on the screen. And then all these letters would come up, and then you're like, what's happening? Oh, press slash, whatever. It was just happening. That age is over.
Yes.
And now we're in the information age. And the things that they know far exceed the things that we know in proportion to the knowledge that was available to us then. And so we're dealing with evolved individuals. The issue though that I see, and I don't know if we're veering off here, but I'm going to say this and then we can get to another question because I could talk about this all night too. The issue that we're seeing is that while they are in some ways worldly wise in their evolution, they are also in some ways emotionally dwarfed because of the information age that they're growing up in. So they can identify things. They can say, oh yeah, that made me, oh, that was, I'm just thinking of all the terms my kids use, like, he was sus, and I don't know what was going on with him, but I mean, I was just, he was just the things that they say, but it shows their insightfulness. If we can speak to them from that perspective, acknowledging that they know, instead of assuming that they don't know, that they couldn't possibly know as much as we do. They don't know as much as we do about life because they can't. They haven't lived life, but they know more about today than we do because they grew up in this age.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just giving them the opportunity to share with us, asking them what they think about things, and giving them a voice, allowing them to use their voices with us because they have strong voices. And as the world continues to grow and develop and advance, they're going to be a big part of what happens next. And so they're the thought leaders in the making, not us. We're headed down the hill.
Right.
Okay. Like,
Okay, Christine, I'm not heading down the hill.
okay. Well, I'm headed to the top of the hill, and then after that, it's the drop. So I'm approaching the pinnacle, then I'm going down. I mean, and I'm going to go down gracefully, but I'm just saying, But yes, they have tremendous value, and their emotional and mental health is extremely important. The way to bolster their ability to cope is to give them a voice, give them a space to use their voice, and encourage them to use their own voices. One of my boys was saying something to me about something that happened at work, and I said, okay, so that person was talking to you in a way that was offensive.
Mhm.
It's okay for you to say, oh, the way you're talking to me is inappropriate. And he was like, Mom, I said, yeah, you get to say that. You get to say that.
Yes,
Because
yes,
that person is infringing upon your
yes.
sense
Emotional
of
well-being.
absolutely.
Yes.
And so we're giving our kids the tools they need to be able to cope by doing and saying things and responding to what's happening in their lives in a way that's empowered and that empowers them to use their voices to ask for what they need, want, and desire.
Okay, so I hear you telling us that we need to use our voices. We need to be able to understand physically what we're feeling and understand that. And also being able to, kind of name it,
Name it.
call it
Yes.
out, name it. What are some other things that we can do? So I'm thinking of like self-care. Is self-care a part of healing our trauma, or should we look at it in those terms? what other things can we do to start, taking those necessary steps, like Erin said, in healing our trauma?
Self-care is more of a preservative practice.
Okay.
And so it's not a reactive practice. It's not like, oh, I was traumatized, so now I need to do self-care. Self-care is this holistic, underlying or foundational practice about how we protect and preserve our well-being. So if we were traumatized, then we need treatment at that point. Like, we need help. It doesn't mean that self-care can't be a part of our lives in any way, but when we're looking specifically at trauma, I wouldn't identify self-care as a way to cope with trauma.
I appreciate that. I'm just trying to, like the things that I've experienced and heard, right?
Yes.
And talking to people, and they're like, oh, yeah, that was really traumatic for me, but I'm just going to, kind of take more baths because that's what
Right.
calms me down, right? That's what
Mhm.
releases my anxiety. So
Mhm.
I'm really trying to like push the envelope with you here to help us
Yes.
really explore some of the language and the terms that we use and the things that we say that we're doing to deal with our trauma. And
Yes.
so I'm sorry.
So that's okay. So once we identify what's happening in our bodies and we're able
Mhm.
to name it and identify the feelings that go along with that, then we come back into a space where we process the trauma. And when we're processing, it's not just that we're talking about it over and over, because that's not that's re-traumatizing ourselves in some cases. Uh, the old school of thought was, the more you talk about it, just keep talking about it, and then you'll process it out, and then you'll feel better. No,
Mhm.
it's making me feel worse, because every time I talk about it, guess what happens to me physiologically? I go back into the same state that I was in when I was experiencing the trauma itself. And so the reason why we don't want to continue, we want to talk about it, but we don't want to continue talking about it, is so that we don't re-traumatize ourselves. There are many different modalities like of psychotherapy that help us to process our trauma without re-traumatizing ourselves. One of those methods is through what's called EMDR, EMDR, and
Okay.
it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And I practice EMDR in my practice, but it's really allowing your brain to go back into the place of what happened to you and to use both sides of your brain
Mhm.
to reprocess what happened in a way that supports and honors your well-being instead of your victimization.
Mm. Okay.
And so it's a very simple process, but the idea scientifically is that, have you heard people say, oh, yeah, we were in an argument and I just had to go out for a walk to clear my head?
Yes.
Okay. When someone is out there walking to clear their head,
Hmm.
while it sounds like, oh, that's what people do, it is scientifically proven that that works. Both sides of the brain are being stimulated. You're walking
Mm.
left, right, left, right, left, right. You go for a long walk. And as you're going for a long walk and you're thinking about the argument that you may have had with a loved one, by the time you get back, you've reprocessed the entire experience. And when you come back, you're like, oh, I feel so much better. Yeah, let's talk now. Honey, I didn't mean to say that. This is what I really wanted to say. This is what I really was meaning when I said, and you're resolving conflict that way. And it's restorative. In the same way that that happens with other people when we're going out to clear our head or to
Hmm.
process something, we can do that related in relationship to our trauma.
Okay.
We can process both sides of our brain. I do it through tapping, and I do this if I have a patient that's online. And in person, there are certain probes you can use that stimulate both sides of the body, or I can use a wand where the person, and I want to be careful that you all aren't thinking I'm hypnotizing people. Hypnotism
Well,
is,
I was gonna say we need to bag it up a little bit. I heard you use the word psychotherapy. I don't know if
yeah,
I'm gonna go and I mean, like I want to be respectful of our community and
Yeah.
destigmatize some of this stuff because when
Yeah.
you first said that, I thought, uh-oh, did we lose people out there? Please come back.
Mhm.
Don't
Mhm.
go. It's okay. It's not a
Yeah.
scary word. No, seriously,
It's not.
we have our own trauma about what that means to go and seek help. Using the
Yes.
words therapy, people say, I'm not crazy. That's the first
Right.
thing they say. You say, well, maybe have you thought
Well,
about going to go seek some therapy? I'm not crazy.
mhm.
I never called you crazy. I never
Yes.
even
I
thought
don't even
that.
think you're crazy. Right.
Right. But and so when I heard psychotherapy, I heard some of the folks out there in the wind saying, no, she lost
Right.
me there.
Psycho.
So
I'm not psycho.
right. So let's talk about how we need to, we need to dispel that. It's
Mhm.
we need to do the things that we need to do. We need to access resources and get the tools we need again to heal ourselves. It doesn't mean there's anything, wrong with you. It's what you need to do to help, you know,
Oof,
be
yes.
whole,
That's right.
right?
Here's the thing about trauma, since we're talking about trauma. So many people come and say, I mean, I just want to know what's wrong with me because there's something seriously wrong with me. What I tell people is there's absolutely nothing wrong with you.
Mhm.
What's wrong is what happened.
Mhm.
Yes.
The trauma is what's wrong.
Mhm.
You're responding normally to an abnormal event. Your body, your mind, the way you're thinking about things now, how fearful you are in dark places, all those things, you're uh, hearing a door slam and you're thinking somebody's coming in to hurt you. Those are all normal. That's normal behavior based on an abnormal event, which would be that trauma causing event.
Right.
And I think I want the audience to know that too, that the things that the way that you're responding to certain things and you're, you know, in your prayer closet or in uh, your secret place thinking these things about yourself like, oh, there's something really wrong. I mean, why am I doing this? You're doing it because you're a normal human being who's experienced
Yes.
an abnormal event.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with any of us. There's nothing wrong with any of us. And I'm going to say this even for people who have serious mental illness.
Mhm.
I'm speaking to them too.
Mhm.
Most serious mental illness is the result of unresolved trauma.
Oh, oh, say that one more time because that's very true.
Mhm.
Very true.
Most serious mental illness is the result of unresolved trauma.
Yes. And I
Yeah.
just recently learned that. And the way I learned it, someone said the same thing and I kept saying, this person wasn't like this,
Mhm.
right? I've known this person for a lifetime. They
Yeah.
were not like this.
Right.
And that, the therapist helped me understand that there were traumatic things that happened. And like you said, built up, never received any care or never really acknowledged that
Mhm.
that's what had happened. Those traumatic events and different things had happened to that person. They were
Yeah.
like, but you shake it up, I keep moving forward, and I'm good, right? I'm able to keep a job, you
Yes.
know, do the things I need to do, right? Be a productive citizen in society. So they felt like they had coped they had been coping with their trauma.
Mhm.
And it was, yeah, another therapist that helped me understand, no, now you see this where it seems, like very exaggerated behavior and different things because they never coped. They never learned strategies to be able to heal from that trauma. So it's going to come out at some point, and this is how it's kind of manifested itself.
Yes. And I want to also be clear that there are biological factors involved in serious mental illness. But I've been practicing for 24 years and I've treated people with serious mental illness at certain points in my career. And inevitably, when I'm meeting with them, it's what I'm seeing on my sofa or in my chair in terms of dynamics and symptoms and things like that. After exploring it with the person, it's the familial trauma, it's the family of origin trauma, it's the unresolved stuff that just keeps going back generation to generation. And so, yes, but I didn't want a psychiatrist calling in or emailing me to say, "Oh, you didn't address the biological factor." Yeah,
Right.
well, there are biological factors when it comes to serious mental illness and mental illness in general, depression, anxiety, but I'm speaking more about like the organic disorders, like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, those things. So,
Is
yes.
it possible that even though someone might kind of misconceptualize that something's wrong with them, right? Is it possible that that could still be their way of being a little bit self-aware, that like they recognize that there has been a change, that they feel differently, and even though they may not be identifying it correctly, but it's still something that's positive because they recognize that change in themselves?
Yes, Erin. Just because you come to a place that you recognize that there's nothing wrong with you, as I was saying, doesn't mean you don't need help. So there's nothing wrong with you in relationship to the trauma, and you need help.
Right. Absolutely.
So I'm glad you brought that out, because it could be, oh, just like we say in our community, like, boy, ain't nothing wrong with you. Go on over there and sit
Yes.
down. And then it's like,
Yes.
okay, nothing's wrong with him, but he's responding to a trauma that happened and he
Right.
needs somebody to help him. So
Right.
yes, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you for that.
You said something else too about praying. Just like you
Mhm.
said, boy, go sit down. Nothing's wrong with you. I've heard several times, oh, we just need to pray. You can,
Mm.
we need to understand prayer. I believe in prayer. Please
Mhm.
believe. I believe in prayer. But we need to access the resources and the
Yes,
folks like you that are trained. We need to go beyond that and not just think as a community we can pray it away.
that's
We just
right.
pray hard enough that the trauma is gonna go, the nightmares will go away. We just pray hard enough that biological, mental health challenge will go.
Right. Mm-mm. We have to understand that, and we cannot over spiritualize our mental health challenges.
Mm,
And in the Black community, especially because we had no other resources,
right.
what ended up happening over time is that we spiritualized everything because God was all we had. We didn't have access to any resources. Who was going to come and talk to us about Massa beating us or taking our children or raping our 10-year-old daughter and her having the baby and then whisking her off to be sold? No, who was going to talk to us about that? We had one source, and it was God. And the issue here is that in anyone's life who has experienced anything that they've had to survive, the challenge as they move forward in life is shifting their mindset from survival mode into thriveship or thriving. Let me make this clear. Part of the reason why the Black community continues to point to God and Jesus as their only source is because we're still operating historically in survival mode.
Wow.
We have moved out of survival mode, but we're still operating and using the same tool that was applicable to us in our time of collective trauma, in our primal wound as a people, which was the transatlantic slave trade. We're operating in our mindset as though our only source is God and there weren't any other resources. Our only source is God. There's one source, but he has provided to us as a result of the evolution of the world resources. Those resources are infused with his power.
Yes.
because he's the source. He's in the middle. The
Yes.
resources are orbiting the source.
Mhm.
Counselors, therapists. Erin, you're a therapist in the school setting.
Yeah, school
Yeah,
psychologists.
we're all yes, we're all resources to the source.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And so we've neglected, we're so, as a people, we're still so much steeped in our trauma
Mm.
collectively. And that's why we haven't developed the mindset collectively to embrace these resources. We're holding on to dear life or holding on for dear life to this one source. Yes, he is our everything. We wouldn't be alive. We wouldn't be able to talk, learn, live, love, none of those things. But because of what we've been through, we don't access, not just because we haven't learned about it or it hasn't been told to us, because that's a dynamic too, the access to care and access to resources,
Mhm.
all of those things. This is a spiritual issue collectively as a people. We're still operating in survival mode.
Wow. I like how you just brought that full circle and really put some context to it, that again, a historical, way of coping, right? In dealing with our trauma, but moving forward, we have evolved,
Yes.
and now we have other resources that God has provided to be able to help us heal and cope, learn coping strategies to
Mhm.
deal with our trauma.
That's right.
Well, I didn't take a breath on that one. That was good. That was yeah.
I
I
think
think
it's
for me, oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I think for me, just kind of like digesting all that information, right? And you connected the dots so beautifully, and I think too,
Mhm.
from different perspectives as far as children to older adults, right? That we understand that trauma can have an impact over the lifetime, and so I think there might also be this perspective that when you're older, you can't change or things can't get better.
mm,
So maybe even for the older viewers, the ones that feel like, been there, done that, it is what it is, what might you say to them that might help kind of inspire some, or kind of just share something with them that might kind of resonate with them, that like things can change, that things can get better still.
yeah. The older population um, has learned that it's not safe to dream and it's not
Mm.
safe to want or desire, because the desire will be deferred beyond their control or denied. And one thing that I think would inspire our seasoned generation is to invite them. I want to invite them to ask themselves the question, what do I desire at this point in my life? What do I want? Many times, once you get to a certain age and stage in life, you look at your life and you're looking at what it is, what you've built, and maybe what you've not built. And you're saying, there isn't much time left to fix any of these things, to change any of these things, to uh, morph my life into more of what I thought I wanted or thought the direction that I was going in before, thought I would get there. But even if your life doesn't look like what you thought it would look like at this stage, you still deserve to give yourself the permission to ask yourself, what do I want? What do I want? When we ask that question, we open up the portal for possibility.
Mm.
If your desire is to, well, I want to get help with my anxiety because I'm a nervous wreck every day. You could be 65 years old saying that. Like, I've been nervous,
Right,
back
right.
in the 60s and 70s, it was, well, grandma's nervous. She got a nervous condition.
Hmm.
It's like, that's what they used to call it. But
Yes,
actually,
yes.
she's suffering from generalized anxiety, just generally just
Right.
anxious, And what do I want? What do I want? If I could, there's, Erin, this question, the miracle question that we can ask people at any point in their journey. But if you could go to sleep tonight and wake up and your life was exactly the way you wanted it to be, the way you dreamed it could be, what would it look like? What would your life look like? And then after answering that question for yourself, then asking yourself, well, what would it take for me to get this part of the picture?
Mm.
What would it take for me to like be able to have the garden that I've always wanted? Oh, I can go to Home Depot tonight. You know what I mean? I can,
It's attainable, right? I
yes,
can.
I can buy one planter to put on the
Right.
balcony thing, and I can just, it's it's in recognizing that your life is not over
Mhm.
just because you have pain that seems intractable.
And I think that
Just,
possibility in of itself is healing, right? That you're taking
yes,
one step and putting yourself forward and making yourself happy and doing things that
yes.
bring you joy. And I think
Mhm.
that in itself, the possibility is just it's an idea, right? And then you're doing the action steps to bring it to fruition. So I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I want to see if you have any thoughts or, yeah, any thoughts about, so in being in healthcare, we know that there are limited um, therapists, especially
Mhm.
therapists of color.
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
say I finally get brave enough or courageous enough, and I said, I'm tired of being sick and tired,
Mhm.
and I realize I need some additional help to help me work through my anxiety or whatever, I'm feeling and going through. And I try to reach out and access services. Well,
Mhm.
it's challenging out there to find someone that looks like me because I
Yes.
already am going into an unknown space. And so I want to be able to at least go to someone that
Ooh.
looks like me, that I feel like there's a sense of connection, and then I
Mm.
don't have to e- over explain myself, or there's just some things that you just you say one word,
We
and it's
know.
like,
We know.
right, like you said the whole, you told me everything, you brought me up to speed, right? So what do we do with that provider shortage? Because there is a, tremendous shortage in, us being able to access therapeutic services from folks that look like us.
Mhm. One resource that I use often or tell people to use if they are looking for a Black therapist is, and if they're a female, therapyforblackgirls.com.
Mhm.
Um, Generally, I have people to go to psychologytoday.com.
Okay.
That's a place to go, and depending on the area you live in, you may not see anyone of color,
Okay.
but you can also broaden your search in your state. I want people to know this, the viewers to know this. If you're looking for a therapist in your area
Hmm.
and you're looking for someone that you can see by telehealth or like on the computer, you don't have to just look in your area. You can look statewide. So when you're on these different sites and you're trying to find a therapist, like Psychology Today, just put in North Carolina, New York, Maryland, you know, California, because we all are licensed statewide wherever we're licensed. I'm licensed in two places, Arizona and North Carolina. Um, that's something to remember so that you can broaden your scope in terms of finding a Black therapist or a therapist of color.
Okay.
Therapy Den, DEN, is also a place to find therapists. But therapy for Black girls is by far the most robust selection, carries the most robust selection of Black therapists that I've seen thus far.
We have therapy for Black Boy Joy or something because our men need help too.
There is one, and yes, I work primarily with women. That's why
I know, I understand, but I just want to put it out there
yes,
for our male viewers.
there is one for Black men, and I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's something like
Well, we don't have it
I'll
here.
have
I'm
to
sure we can make sure to
I'll
put
have
it in the,
in
put
the
it in
show notes.
the
Put it
yes, show
in the
notes
show
so
notes.
that those that watch it later can have access to those resources.
Yes, because our men definitely needed to, and our boys.
Yeah,
Our boys
yes.
and our men,
Yes.
especially the way we socialize them, to definitely not only not have an emotional vocabulary, but actually not to feel. You can't feel, and much less have an emotional vocabulary.
Right. No, it's very true. It's
Mhm.
very true. And we need to deal with all of that, right? There's so
Yeah,
many facets and so many challenges that we bring to the table on top of the trauma.
I know. I know.
And to really, I really feel like if somebody gets to the place where they want to access services, we really need to, that's my thing now. I really want to make sure that there are resources and things that I can bring to them. And I so appreciate you saying that it doesn't have to be in your state, right? Because now we're this virtual world, right? I can access therapeutic services through my screen, and I can be talking to somebody, in New York that can be helping me.
Well,
So,
yes, I want to clarify I want to clarify that it's definitely in your state, but it doesn't have to be in your area.
right,
If you live in Bronx, New York, you don't have to see a therapist that's around the corner from your house. It can be
right.
someone who's licensed anywhere in New York.
Mhm.
So, but it does have, if you live in a certain area and you are using a licensed therapist who is only licensed in that area, they can only see you if you live in the state where they're
No,
licensed.
I appreciate that because I'm thinking, okay, so I'm in California, but I'm in
Yeah.
Southern California where the, Black population is a lot less. But if
Mhm.
I look in Oakland, I never thought,
Yes.
well,
Right.
right, there may be a more concentrated, therapeutic options in
Yes.
Oakland,
Yes.
So
And
that
nowadays,
broadens my scope. That allows me to realize that there's more resources, like you said, than just around the corner. So I don't get
yes.
frustrated and say, "Oh, well, I couldn't find anybody, so I guess that means I shouldn't go."
Yeah,
No,
just
you know,
suffer. Keep suffering.
right,
With the discipline of psychology, which Aaron is a part of that discipline, and also increasingly so with professional counselors and licensed clinical social workers, they're working on this. If you choose a psychologist and they're part of the what is it called? Not an exchange, but it's a way for them to practice in multiple states, and it
Mhm.
makes it easier for psychologists to do so. They're the oldest profession that is able to practice that way because of legislation and changes in laws, and they push stuff through. Social workers, clinical social workers, and licensed professional counselors are also moving in that direction so that we eventually will have privileges similar to how an MD would have privileges in another state to practice medicine. Clinicians are now broadening their practice scope, not scope, but range in terms of where they can practice through these different legislative changes, and just they're just making progress in that area. So I wanted to bring that up too.
Well, we're starting to come to a close, but I really would like you to take this time and space to just really talk to our viewers and anything that we may not have touched upon or talked about that you really think is imperative that they know as far as healing, things that they can do to start healing from their trauma. I really would like to be able to give you this opportunity right now just to share some more thoughts with our viewers and with us.
Yes. I think the primary thing that I want to say is for those of you who recognize that you've experienced trauma, and that you're still suffering from the effects of trauma, I want you to know that not only do you deserve to heal, but healing is available to you. Not only do you deserve to heal, but healing is available to you. You are not hopeless. I don't care what it is. Layered trauma, ritualistic sexual abuse, multiple rapes, grief and loss, separation and loss, foster care, adoption, abuse, neglect, whatever it is, and however layered it is, there is healing for you. And the only thing that you have to do is reach out for it. And so we've given you today some resources, and you all have been, some of our listeners have been praying about this and reaching out to the source. And I want you to know today that maybe this conversation is God's way of pointing you to resources and to letting you know that it's okay to reach for the resources, because in those resources, you may find the lifeline to your healing. You may find that you can untether yourself from your abusers and untether yourself from the pain that you've carried in your heart for decades. You don't have to keep carrying it. You can heal and you can be restored. And I don't mean just a little bit, I mean completely, fully and utterly restored. And so that's what I want to share with the audience tonight, is that there is not just hope, but there are tangible ways for you to get the help you need. And if you've been wondering how you can get that help, you have some of the answers that we've given you tonight. And, this is a recording, so you'll be able to go back and look at it. Go back and look at it. And then go to the websites that we've mentioned today. You can reach out to me even if you need some help, because I know how to connect. You can email me at Christina@ChristinaSanford.com. I will not be your therapist, but I can connect you with therapists in your area or provide you with some resources so that you can connect with therapists in your area. The healing journey from trauma it takes time. And once you begin to identify how it's affected you and what's going on, and you begin to get help from an individual therapist, that final step is connecting with the community of people who can help you in your journey past the healing into the new life that you will have as a result of your healing. These are places like Celebrate Recovery, your church groups, community groups, women's groups. These are places where you can build community and really begin to flourish in your life. The trauma has stymied you in very profound ways. But once you break out of it, once you break through, there's a whole new life waiting for you. And I want you to have that new life. And I know you want it. You may have been afraid to say you wanted it, but today is the day for you to tell the truth about what you want. You can have the life you want. You just got to get the help.
Thank you. Thank you. Aaron, do you want to close us out? That was, yes.
That was wonderful. I mean, I felt like you were talking directly to me. I felt all of that. I felt all of it. We just appreciate you taking the time to just be here with us and share these amazing resources and conversation with the Healthy Heart Nation community as well as beyond. And we're just so grateful for your time. So thank you for being here.
Thank you
Yes.
for having me, ladies.